Some of you may not know that I occasionally play with my little stuff, Micro Four Thirds. In this video, I'll give you my impressions of the Panasonic GH6 from a Sony A7 IV fanboy's point of view. Coming from a full frame camera, I really don't think the GH6 is a replacement. However, the prices are close enough that I think a comparison might be useful for some folks. I'll be discussing body, autofocus, image quality, and why you might consider one camera or the other. Before going further, be sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already. And with the formalities out of the way, let's have a look at the bodies. Everybody knows that the GH6 is a little beast. I got this hard shell case. It's pretty neat, USA gear. It has a Pelican style little foam eggshell, and I put a Kydex holster so I can just clip it to my belt. Let's get on with the camera. Here is the camera. Next to it is the A7 Mark IV, and the grip, they are more similar than they're different. They're both beefy grips, but I'll concentrate on the GH6. What I am not particularly happy about is this smooth area. See the grip, it's nice and beefy, but once you have it in the smooth area, your palm slips on this. It just doesn't feel right. And it's a shame because they use such great rubber right here, but they don't use it right here. Of course, with the Sony, you have the most basic articulating screen, and they did the fix for it with the opening on the bottom, which is great. However, when you're looking at the GH6, you have a two-way screen. It tilts and it does fully articulating, which is fantastic. I would say that the biggest downside is that this flip mechanism, it doesn't go that far out. If you're angling upwards, which I do often, you'll have to crouch down a little bit to get to see it. Other than that, I mean, it doesn't go out that far. See, that's as far as it gets. And it doesn't go the other direction in case you want to flip down. So you just have to toss this out for an overhead type of shot. This USB-C charges really fast. I was very surprised because I would use my camera, drive to another location, put it in the car charger or battery pack, and by the time I get to the next location, I'm already topped off. I don't even have to dip into the second battery, which is great. This HDMI at the bottom, I don't know. I think it might have been better if it was on top and the charger on the bottom. Small thing. Headphone jack and the mic port is nice and out of the way, as you can see. So if you're going super basic, mic jack, you're good. Of course, this camera has the recording lights here, which is awesome. The front buttons, again, nice touches. This recording button, I've accidentally recorded so many times with that. We'll get to the overall operation, and I would say that the Sony, it looks deceptive because it doesn't have any of the labelings. See, the labelings make the Panasonic very intuitive. However, with the Sony, because of the programmability, I can operate this faster than this. For instance, you have white balance, ISO, and exposure comp. So I programmed it so I'm holding, scrolling, holding, scrolling, holding, scrolling. That just prevents accidental movement. However, you do have this lock, which is great too. With the Sony, if I'm holding this, I can scroll white balance. I can scroll this one for ISO. And then I can scroll this bottom one for exposure compensation. On top of that, when I'm not holding it, I have 3 different operations. So I can scroll the focus modes, like I do here. With the Panasonic, it's on the focus mode, and you kind of have to change this focus mode often because the focus isn't superb. It's pretty good though. More on that later. Other than that, Panasonic does have extra buttons, and
I'd say the coolest feature is that if you're trying to learn this system, okay, you have these function buttons. You can long press this and then you can change it right away. There you go. I could just change it to something else. I have the top one to enlarge live display. I want to get back to this rear screen, and the other downside is that with the airflow thingy, it's quite big. So it makes your camera bigger than a normal camera. You see this, you can now really see how thick this camera is. And I haven't found any tripod plate that uses this locking pin. I really want to use it down here, but nothing in the market at this current moment, or nothing I know of, except for purely video plates. Lastly, on the top, the Panasonic has the mode for a single shot, burst, or the super burst, which gives you 75 frames per second, or high res, time lapse, or camera delay, which is nice. So in operation, you just have two different styles. This one is more tailored to customization. This one is more intuitive because everything is properly labeled, and I love properly labeled items. It's just that this one truly does have more flexibility, and I do operate this really fast. One thing I forgot to mention is that this video and photo switch, yeah, Panasonic uses the old conventional way. So if you're in video, your settings are, you can lock them in as well and have it for stills, but you can see you have 3-4 modes, right? So that means that this camera is more oriented towards stills than it is for video, because you only have one for video. And then in the menu, you can change manual shutter aperture priority. With this one, when you're in video mode, you have access to manual shutter aperture program. When you're in stills, you have all 4 as well. So it's just more intuitive when it comes to mode switching with the Sony. Lastly, I want to talk about the memory card. So the Sony uses a mixed slot that can take CF Express A or SD UHS 2. This is great because if I'm looking to use all intra, I can use the CF Express Type A. If I'm looking for just fast recording, then I could just use dual SD cards. With the Panasonic, I am stuck 1-1. I don't particularly like using these CF Express Type Bs, but I am thankful that it has 2 rather than nothing, because I can always do a backup, and I don't use the highest mode, so I could either roll over recording or I can use backup pretty much most of the time. The codecs, they're pretty flexible. There's only a couple modes that require the CF Express Type B.
Let's have a look at autofocus. We're going to take a look at the sequence. It's using continuous autofocus center zone and multi-burst shot. There's not a whole lot of forward and backwards movement, but there is some. Starting off with the first shot, it is autofocus, which may be concerning. However, it gets better. The thing with the autofocus is that Panasonics typically move in and out really fast, and continuous autofocus can be a problem. But as you can see here, this is 100%, 25 megapixels, and they're looking pretty darn sharp. So it moves in and out really fast, but for this instance, it seems to work fine. As you can see, it wasn't as big of a problem as I was expecting. Autofocus for video. As you can see, the Sony has near perfect autofocus, even with third-party lenses. This is the Samyang AF35 f1.4 version 2 at 1.4. I want to preface this discussion with some background. This is my third Panasonic. I've been with Sony from the beginning with the original R, and I'll say that the GH6 is a massive upgrade in autofocus compared to the Panasonic G9, and I thought that camera was mostly usable. I would say that the GH6 is more than usable with human subjects. I've purposely slowed it down to prevent pulsing, -2 and -3 from what I recall. It's well behaved, like my kids with access to Wi-Fi. If I'm going to rank it on a Sony scale, it would be in between the A7R2, A7 III, about on par with the A7R3. Not nearly state of the art, but at some point, diminishing returns becomes a factor. There is a catch, and that's with 24 and 120p. The AF lags behind a bit. I don't even think it works with 300p, and I'm fine with that. Image quality. This one is a more sticky subject because there's photos and the way you view photos. And then there's video. Full frame really excels at mid to far distance subjects and blurring the crap out of the backgrounds, similar to 5 shots of tequila. For photos, I did find that the GH6 was very sharp and pleasing. And yes, I know about the poor dynamic range. I can live without hard shadow pulls. When it comes to video, the GH6 is a high frame rate monster. 4K 120, 1080p at 300p. It does soften at 300, however, it's glorious. Manipulating time is such a nice feature that it can really amplify your storytelling process. Unfortunately, you can't roll back time to regrow your hair. The dynamic range is a more tricky situation. Vlog is good, noticeably better than Vlog Lite. However, it's well below Sony's full frame. It's quite easy to clip and you'll need to pay more attention in dialing exposure. That's where dynamic range boost comes into play. And at first I did find it to be a hassle until I started filming with it a lot. When I'm outdoors and I'm filming, I could be there for quite a while and do all my filming in that time span. And as it turns out, turning on and off that feature with the use of NDs was only a minor inconvenience, like showering daily.
Wow.
Keep in mind that the A7 IV, you have a base ISO of 800 with S-Log 3, and that's only 1 1/3 stops off. You'll likely need NDs as well. What no one is talking about and severely overlooked, the X factor of the GH6 is pixel to pixel mode, aka crop factor. Don't get me wrong, the A7 IV does crop extremely well, but we all know you can't walk backwards with 4K 60. Pixel mode is offered with nearly every filming mode, with the exception of very high frame rates like 300p. It'll drop back down to 120 from what I recall. In 1080p, the reach is enormous, which is great if you're trying to keep things small and tidy. Longer reach is almost always the biggest problem among photographers, filmmakers, and Asians. Another thing nobody talks about are the bit rates and file sizes in video. Panasonic offers a ton of choices, too many to list. However, the data rates are large and larger, while Sony has legitimate, small, medium, large, and ridiculous. I'm not particularly interested in large and ridiculous as a high volume filmer, and this is where Sony shines. I feel it can achieve as good as or better image quality from the Sony at lower bit rates, probably something to do with the sensor size. That said, it's a minor gripe, and recording direct to SSD, a feature that is promised in a future update, would more than make up for it. Some random tidbits. Time-lapse feature is nice. It does stills and can generate a video from the output. Panasonic users all know this already. Some features are gone, like in-camera panning and focus stacking. Dual IS is nice and probably as good as it gets. However, it's not perfect. For stills, I can get decent keeper rate with a multi-second shot, and the fact that I can get any usable shots handheld for that long is quite amazing. For video, it's rather good for me. However, I don't think the practicality is a whole lot more than the Sony when used with active stabilization. This is strictly my feeling. and I think production feels a bit amateurish with too much movement. However, it sure is nice for the 10% of shots that require movement. Good old-fashioned locked-off shots is where the GH6 shines. With boost IS and E stabilization, there is a minimal amount of movement and it's easier to achieve tripod-style shots. I have a YouTuber in the family that has a much larger channel, and she wasn't impressed with dual stabilization of the GH6, which was surprising to me. So I've got to work on improving that, or alternatively, face violence from the wife. Another consideration for the GH6 is that the Panasonic is strongly supportive of their products through firmware. I seriously cannot wait for the day I can record straight to SSD, then plug in and start editing right away. Last random feature that's not advertised about the Panasonic G6, LUTs. The Panasonic website offers a collection of VariCam LUTs to get you going, and I absolutely love the nicest LUT. I mean, it's literally called nicest 709, and it is indeed an amazing profile. As for the subject of light streaks, it happens when you have an extremely high contrast scene in video. It can create a streaking effect. I'm using firmware 1.2. I haven't seen it. Maybe they fixed it, maybe not. Does it matter? If there's 10 stops of light levels between subjects to produce these artifacts, I'm not going to make a mountain of molehill. Final thoughts. When it comes to overall image quality, the larger sensor wins it. And at the same time, it's hard to be disappointed in the image quality of the Panasonic GH6. Both cameras have great menus, and I like the separation and style of the Sony better as a hybrid camera, while the Panasonic is truly a video-oriented camera that oddly has some parts that appeal to photographers. There are some things that the Sony does better, like switching auto modes in video, limiting and controlling AF, and the overall menu. While Panasonic allows you better control of shutter types, the ability to control recording formats without menu digging, and offers more recording choices, and a major one is HEVC 10-bit 420 at 4K 30, an odd omission by Sony. The screen being partially tilt and fully articulating is a real pleasure, and I'm using the tilt feature primarily when I'm behind the camera, and for the few odd angles, the articulating screen is nice as well. At the end of the day, the A7 IV is a fantastic tool that absolutely excels at capturing the most beautiful images and video, while the GH6 is certainly the more flexible tool and quite the masterpiece of a camera. Both system cameras have exceptional lens selections, and that's why I'm using one or the other. The full frame sharpness and separation is tough to replicate in a small sensor. If that's your highest priority, then the Sony is great. As a raw workhorse geared towards video production with high levels of photo abilities, combined with versatility, the Panasonic GH6 is an amazing tool and shouldn't be discounted for its smaller sensor. That's all I have for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed it and found it useful. See you on the next one. Take care.